Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into the life and times of Gaius Julius Caesar.
A figure that I think continues to fascinate us
Yeah,
centuries later.
absolutely.
And I think, when we think about Caesar's story, it's not just ancient history.
Yeah,
This is really a story about ambition,
yeah,
about power, and about how individual choices really can shape the destiny of nations. I mean, in a lot of ways, he's a prototype for any upstanding leaders throughout history.
absolutely. And, we're talking about 100 BC ancient Rome. What is it like for little Gaius? Like, what's the scene when he arrives? What is Rome like at that time?
Well, imagine a Rome that's a republic, not yet an empire, and it's a time of real political turmoil.
Yeah,
And, power struggles between different factions. And right in the thick of it, you have Caesar's family, the Julii,
okay.
who boast this lineage tracing back to Aeneas, the hero of the Trojan War, and even the goddess Venus.
So, talk about pressure, right? But are they actually powerful, or are they just kind of like, riding the coattails of their ancestors?
Well, that's where it gets interesting because despite that prestigious lineage, Caesar's immediate family wasn't at the top of the political hierarchy.
Okay,
His father held the position of praetor, which is a significant role,
yeah,
but not the most influential.
right.
But his mother, Aurelia, was known for her strong character and wisdom.
I can only imagine, her influence in shaping young Caesar
Oh,
and
absolutely.
his ambition.
Yeah,
It sounds like his childhood was anything but stable, though. Like, there was a point where he even had to flee Rome as a teenager.
absolutely. I mean, this is a very brutal political scene in Rome at this time. And when Sulla, a very powerful general and dictator, comes to power, he targeted Caesar because of his family ties
Oh, wow.
to Sulla's rivals. And so Caesar, barely out of his teens, is forced to flee Rome to save his own life.
It's like a real-life Game of Thrones type of situation.
It really is.
But instead of just like, hiding out, he jumps right into this military career. And I guess this is where he really starts to flex his strategic muscles.
Absolutely. He has East serving in Asia and Cilicia,
Wow.
proving himself as a courageous soldier, but also a really brilliant strategist. I mean, there's even a story about him earning the prestigious civic crown for saving a fellow soldier's life in battle.
Wow.
Talk about a resume builder.
Right. Okay, so we've got the bravery, we've got the strategy. Where does the ambition come in? Because wasn't there a story about him getting kind of a reality check from a statue of Alexander the Great?
Yeah, this is a great story that really captures the essence of Caesar's drive.
Okay.
Picture this. He sees a statue of Alexander the Great,
Yeah.
who had conquered, most of the known world by his early 30s.
Oh, wow.
And Caesar basically has a meltdown,
Oh, no.
lamenting that he himself at a similar age hasn't achieved even a fraction of that glory.
So less ancient history and more like relatable millennial moment, just constantly comparing yourself.
Right.
But I think that in Caesar's case, this wasn't just envy. This was really fuel for his determination
Oh, yeah.
to make his mark on the world. So how does he go from soldier to political mastermind? What are his first moves?
Well, Caesar was really a master at navigating the very complex and often treacherous world of Roman politics.
Right.
And upon returning to Rome, he strategically aligns himself with the populares, which is a faction representing the interests of the common people.
Okay, so he understands the power of appealing to the masses. So is this when he starts the whole charm offensive with all the public works and generosity?
Exactly. He knew how to play the crowd. He organized these lavish games. He funded public works projects. He delivered these really rousing speeches
Yeah.
that would really resonate with the average Roman. He was a natural orator.
Yeah.
And he understood the importance of connecting with the people, not just the elites.
Right. So he's building his popularity, he's climbing the political ladder. What are some of the key positions he held before making his big move?
Well, he rises steadily through the ranks. He first becomes an aedile, which is responsible for public games and buildings. Then, in 63 BC, he secured the coveted position of Pontifex Maximus,
Wow.
the high priest of Roman religion. So this is a major power move,
Yeah.
giving him religious authority on top of his growing political clout.
So he's got the people on his side, he's got the religious authority. He's basically like a Roman rock star at this point.
He is.
But he knew he couldn't do it alone, right? And that's where the first triumvirate comes in this legendary power trio that really changed the game.
Absolutely. I mean, this is really a stroke of political genius. Caesar recognized that to achieve his ambitions, he needed allies.
Yeah,
And not just any allies, he needed the heavy hitters.
right.
And so he forms this alliance with Ponti the Great, a celebrated general,
Okay.
and Marcus Licinius Crassus, a man of just immense wealth. And this wasn't just, a friendly agreement. This was a calculated power play that really reshaped the entire political landscape of Rome.
And this alliance catapults him to the consulship, right? That's like the ultimate prize in Roman politics.
Exactly, with the combined might of Pompey and Crassus backing him up, Caesar secures the consulship in 59 BC.
Wow.
And this wasn't just a personal victory, this allowed him to enact populist reforms, solidifying his support among the people.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial part. After his consulship, he secures a 5-year appointment as proconsul of Gaul,
Okay.
which is a vast territory encompassing modern-day France, parts of Belgium, Germany, and Italy.
And this is where Caesar goes from politician to legend.
Right.
It's Caesar the Conqueror time. So tell us, what were the Gallic Wars all about?
The Gallic Wars, which lasted from 58 to 50 BC, were really Caesar's military proving ground.
Okay.
He wasn't just fighting for territory, he was forging this image as a brilliant military leader.
Yeah.
A strategic genius capable of conquering even the fiercest opponents.
Right.
And of course, he made sure to document all of his greatness in his commentaries on the Gallic War, which is a brilliant piece of self-promotion masquerading as a military chronicle.
Pretty clever. So walk us through some of the highlights of these campaigns. What were some of his most impressive feats?
Well, the Gallic Wars were a series of, hard-fought battles and strategic maneuvers, but one that truly stands out is the Siege of Alesia in 52 BC.
Okay.
Imagine this. Caesar's forces completely surround the Gallic stronghold, led by the formidable Vercingetorix.
Wow.
They constructed these fortifications, they repelled attacks, they even faced a massive relief force coming to the Gauls' aid.
It sounds like something straight out of a movie. Like, how did he manage to pull off such a victory?
It was a combination of sheer grit, tactical brilliance, and maybe a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
But Caesar held his ground, he outmaneuvered his opponents, and eventually forced Vercingetorix to surrender.
Wow.
And this victory essentially cemented Roman control over Gaul
Yeah.
and catapulted Caesar to these new heights of fame and power.
So you would think he would return to Rome a conquering hero. Everyone's throwing a parade. He gets to enjoy the fruits of his victory.
Right.
In the story, but of course, as we all know, it's never that simple, especially in Roman politics.
Never that simple.
So what happens next?
Well, while Caesar was off conquering Gaul, the political landscape in Rome had shifted dramatically.
Okay.
His former ally Pompey had grown increasingly wary of Caesar's growing power and popularity.
Yeah.
The Senate, never really a fan of Caesar's populist leanings, became outright hostile.
Oh.
The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the course of Roman history.
This feels like a very pivotal moment. Like things could have gone in a completely different direction. So what happens? What sets this conflict in motion?
Well, it all comes down to this seemingly insignificant river, the Rubicon.
Okay.
In 49 BC, the Senate, influenced by Pompey, ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen.
Wow.
It was a blatant attempt to strip him of his power and leave him vulnerable to his enemies.
Yeah.
And Caesar, faced with this ultimatum, had a choice to make: submit or fight.
Right.
And in a move that has become legendary, he chose defiance.
And then he utters those famous words, alia iacta est, the die is cast.
The die is cast.
Chills. What does this decision mean? What are the consequences of crossing the Rubicon?
By crossing that river with his legions, Caesar was essentially declaring war on the Roman Republic, on his former allies, on the very system he had risen through. It was a gamble, a bold and audacious move that plunged Rome into a bloody civil war.
So it's Caesar versus Pompey, the former allies turned bitter rivals.
Yeah.
This is a clash of the titans, a battle for the soul of Rome. Where do we go from here? What are the key moments in this civil war?
What follows is a series of epic battles across the Mediterranean world.
Wow.
Caesar, despite facing some setbacks early on, consistently outmaneuvered his opponents, proving his military genius time and again. His legions were fiercely loyal, and his tactical brilliance was undeniable.
And this all culminates in the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC.
Right.
This clash is a turning point, a real game changer in Roman history. What happens there?
Pharsalus was a devastating defeat for Pompey. He fled to Egypt, where he was treacherously assassinated. Caesar, pursuing his former ally, arrives in Egypt to find himself entangled in yet another power struggle, this time for the Egyptian throne.
And this is where Cleopatra enters the scene. Talk about a legendary encounter. What's the story there? What role does she play in Caesar's life and this whole unfolding drama?
It's an encounter that adds another layer of intrigue to Caesar's already complex story.
Right?
He sides with Cleopatra in her bid for the throne, helping her secure her power. Their relationship, initially strategic, blossoms into this passionate love affair.
Wow.
They even have a son together, Caesarion.
It's like a real-life soap opera unfolding amidst all of this chaos. So with Pompey gone, Cleopatra by his side, does Caesar finally return to Rome a conquering hero? Is this the moment he sees his absolute power?
He returns to Rome, yes.
Okay.
But the city he finds is a changed place. The Senate, weakened and fearful, grants him unprecedented power. And in 44 BC, Caesar is named Dictator for life, a title that solidifies his absolute control but also fuels the resentment of his enemies.
So he's reached the pinnacle of power, he's achieved what he set out to do, but we all know how this story ends.
Right.
The shadow of the Ides of March is looming, so what leads to this dramatic turn of events? What happens in the months leading up to Caesar's assassination?
Well, despite his accomplishments and his popularity among the common people, Caesar's growing power alienated many within the Roman elite.
Okay.
They feared his ambition whispered about his potential aspirations to become king.
Uh-oh.
A move that would have shattered the foundations of the Roman Republic conspiracy began to brew in the shadows,
Yeah.
led by men who had once been Caesar's friends and allies.
Right.
And this is where we leave you on the brink of one of the most famous events in history.
Yeah.
Join us next time as we delve into the dramatic events of the Ides of March and the tumultuous aftermath of Caesar's assassination.
Absolutely looking forward to it. Welcome back. Last time we'd asked Caesar, standing triumphant but walking on eggshells, named dictator for life, but surrounded by whispers of conspiracy. It's the Ides of March 44 BC, and the Roman world is holding its breath. So what happens next? Do those plotting against Caesar make their move?
Picture this. The Senate chamber Caesar enters seemingly unconcerned by the rumors and warnings swirling around him.
Right.
He's surrounded by men he considers friends and allies. Among them are Brutus and Cassius, respected senators, who owe much of their own success to Caesar's patronage.
Talk about dramatic irony. It's like a scene from a Shakespearean tragedy, everyone knowing what's about to happen except the main character.
Exactly, and as Caesar addresses the Senate, the conspirators close in their daggers hidden beneath their togas. Casca strikes first, followed by a flurry of blows from the others. Caesar, caught completely off guard, tries to defend himself, but it's too late. He falls to the ground, pierced by 23 wounds, his blood staining the marble floor of the Senate.
It's a brutal end for a man who had defied death countless times on the battlefield. So what's the immediate aftermath to the conspirators seize control? Did they get that return to the good old days of the Republic that they were hoping for?
Well, that's where the conspirators made a fatal miscalculation.
Okay.
They assumed that eliminating Caesar would be enough to restore the old order,
Right.
that the Senate would regain its authority and Rome would go back to the way things were, but history rarely follows such a neat and predictable script.
So what went wrong? Did they underestimate Caesar's popularity? Did they just completely misjudge the mood of the Roman people?
On all counts, Caesar, despite his dictatorial powers, was still popular with the masses. They saw him as a strong leader who brought stability and prosperity. The conspirators, on the other hand, came across as elitist, out of touch with the common people. They failed to rally the public to their cause.
And let's not forget about Caesar's loyal supporters, right? People like Mark Antony, his right-hand man, and Octavian, his adopted son and heir. What role do they play in this whole chaotic post-Caesar world?
Well, Mark Antony, a skilled orator and shrewd politician, seizes the moment.
Okay.
At Caesar's funeral, he delivers this impassioned eulogy,
Yep.
publicly displaying Caesar's body and highlighting his wounds. It's a masterful display of political theater designed to whip the crowd into a frenzy of grief and outrage.
Wow, talk about turning the tables. He's basically using Caesar's death as a rallying cry, painting the conspirators as villains and turning Caesar into a martyr.
Exactly, and it works brilliantly. Rome erupts into chaos.
Wow.
With riots and violence breaking out, the conspirators, realizing they've completely lost control of the situation, are forced to flee Rome for their own safety.
Okay, so Anthony's in a powerful position now. Does he just step into Caesar's shoes and take over? Does he become the new dictator?
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
While Antony holds a lot of cards, there's another player entering the game, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir.
Right.
Remember, he's only 19 at this point.
Yeah.
But he's ambitious and determined to avenge his father's death and claim his inheritance.
Ah, Octavian, this is the guy who will eventually become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. But at this point, he's just a teenager thrust onto the world's biggest stage. What's his next move? Does he challenge Antony for power?
Initially, there's a lot of tension and suspicion between them. You know, they're both vying for power, each trying to figure out the other's game, but they quickly realize that to defeat the conspirators and stabilize Rome, they need to join forces.
So it's a classic enemy of my enemy is my friend situation. Tell us about this uneasy alliance.
Well, in 43 BC, they formed the Second Triumvirate along with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, another powerful general.
Okay.
This alliance isn't based on friendship or trust. It's a purely pragmatic arrangement fueled by a shared desire for revenge and a thirst for power.
So they team up, they divide the Roman world amongst themselves, but it's just a matter of time before this alliance explodes, right? They're not exactly going to be sharing power happily ever after.
You're reading the situation perfectly. The Second Triumvirate is a volatile mix of personalities and ambitions. They might have a common enemy in the conspirators. But once that threat is neutralized, the cracks in their alliance start to show.
So what's the breaking point? What causes the Second Triumvirate to finally implode?
Well, there are a few factors at play.
Okay.
First, Lepidus, the weakest of the three, is gradually sidelined and eventually stripped of his power.
Right.
The real rivalry, though, is between Antony and Octavian.
Okay.
They're both master strategists, both playing a long game, and their ambition eventually puts them on a collision course.
And this rivalry takes a fascinating turn, right? Enter Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt and former lover of Julius Caesar. What role does she play in this power struggle between Antony and Octavian?
Well, Cleopatra, a brilliant and ambitious ruler in her own right, becomes a key player in this drama unfolding between Antony and Octavian. Remember, after the defeat of the conspirators, Antony heads east to consolidate his power and secure resources.
Right.
He meets with Cleopatra at Egypt, and their relationship initially strategic blossoms into this passionate love affair.
So we have Antony in the east with Cleopatra by his side and Octavian back in Rome. It's a recipe for conflict, right? How does this geographic and romantic divide play out in their power struggle?
Well, Octavian, being the savvy politician he is, uses Antony's relationship with Cleopatra to his advantage.
Okay.
He launches this masterful propaganda campaign,
Oh, wow.
portraying Antony as a traitor seduced by an exotic foreign queen and neglecting his duties to Rome.
Right.
He spreads rumors that Antony plans to rule the Roman world from Egypt with Cleopatra as his queen.
It's a classic case of spinning the narrative to win over public opinion, and it works, right? The Roman people start to see Antony as a threat, as someone who's gone soft and betrayed Roman values.
Exactly. Octavian plays on those fears and anxieties, contrasting his own image as the descender of Roman tradition with Antony's supposed betrayal, and this carefully crafted propaganda campaign sets the stage for the final showdown between the two former allies.
This is building up to an epic clash, a battle for control of the Roman world. So where does this final confrontation take place? What happens?
The stage is set at Actium off the western coast of Greece in 31 BC. It's a massive naval battle, hundreds of warships clashing in this chaotic struggle for supremacy. Antony, with Cleopatra by his side, commands a formidable fleet.
Wow.
But Octavian's forces, led by the brilliant Admiral Agrippa, are better organized and strategically positioned.
This sounds like a scene ripped from a Hollywood blockbuster. So what's the outcome? Who emerges victorious from this clash of the titans?
The Battle of Actium is a decisive victory for Octavian.
Wow.
Antony and Cleopatra's fleet is routed, their forces scattered, they flee back to Egypt in disgrace, their dreams of power shattered.
So what happens to this legendary couple? Do they manage to regroup and fight another day? Or is this the end of the line for Antony and Cleopatra?
Well, their defeat at Actium marks the end of their ambitions. Octavian pursues them to Egypt, determined to crush all remaining opposition. Antony, facing overwhelming odds and realizing all is lost, commits suicide. Cleopatra, rather than suffer the humiliation of capture and be paraded through the streets of Rome, as a trophy chooses death, as well, famously ending her life by the bite of an asp.
It's a tragic and dramatic end to their story, a tale of love, ambition, and ultimately defeat. But with Antony and Cleopatra out of the picture, Octavian stands alone, the undisputed master of the Roman world. What happens next? Does he just declare himself emperor and call it a day?
Well, Octavian is a much more subtle and cutting politician than that. He understands that seizing power outright would alienate the Senate and the traditional elite he needs to consolidate his authority carefully while appearing to respect Roman traditions.
So he's got to play this delicate game, balancing his ambition with the need to appease those who still cling to the ideals of the Republic. This sounds like the start of a whole new chapter in Roman history. So what are Octavian's next moves? How does he transform himself from victorious general to the first Roman emperor? Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and legacy of Julius Caesar. Last time we left off with Octavian Caesar's heir standing victorious after this long and brutal power struggle. And he's got the whole Roman world in his hands, but he's also got this delicate balancing act ahead of him. Like, how does he secure his power without alienating the traditional elite who are still yearning for, the old republic?
Yeah, and what's fascinating about Octavian is his understanding of the power of perception.
Yeah.
He knows that just as grabbing the crown and declaring himself emperor won't fly, he needs to be much more strategic, much more subtle in his approach.
So how does he pull it off? How does he go from being just another ambitious Roman general to becoming the first emperor, the one who ushers in the era of the Roman Empire?
Well, he starts by making some very public and symbolic gestures. He formally restores the Roman Republic,
Right.
gives them some of his extraordinary powers,
Right.
even disbands some of his legions. So he's really playing the role of the reluctant leader, the savior who's only interested in preserving Roman traditions.
Okay, but, let's be real. No one gets to his position by giving up power completely. So what's going on behind the scenes while he's putting on this show of Republican virtue?
Behind the facade, Octavian is very carefully consolidating his control. He keeps command of key legions,
Right.
strategically positioned throughout the empire. He makes sure he's got the military muscle to back up his authority if anyone gets any funny ideas.
So it's like he's saying, I'm just here to serve the Republic, but don't mess with me.
Exactly.
What else is he doing to solidify his position?
Well, he also understands the importance of keeping the people happy. He invests heavily in public works projects, grain distribution,
Yeah.
keeping those bellies full and the spirit high. And of course, he stages these grand spectacles and games, bread and circuses, as they say.
Classic power move, keep the masses entertained and they won't ask too many questions. But what about the Senate? Because they're the ones who still hold a lot of the traditional authority. How does Octavian manage them?
Well, he's very clever about it. He
Okay.
rewards loyal senators with positions of power and prestige, making them feel like they're still part of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he subtly marginalizes those who oppose him, stripping them of their influence. It's a slow and steady process of consolidating his power without rocking the boat too much.
So by 27 BC, he's basically amassed more power than even Caesar had.
Right.
But he's done it without raising any red flags. He hasn't declared himself, king or emperor. So is this when he finally goes for the title?
Not exactly. He's much more cunning than that.
Okay.
Instead of taking a title that would alienate the traditionalists, he accepts the title Augustus, which means revered or sacred. It implies divine favor, something greater than just a mortal ruler. It's the perfect blend of political savvy and religious authority.
So he's not just a man anymore. He's practically a god king. And with that, the Roman Republic is officially dead. Long live the Roman Empire. What does this new era look like? What are some of the hallmarks of Augustus's rule?
Well, Augustus ushers in this period known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
Okay.
It's an era of relative stability, economic growth, and territorial expansion. He reforms the Roman administration, professionalizes the civil service, and invests heavily in infrastructure, building roads, aqueducts, temples. He's leaving his mark on the Roman world in a very tangible way.
So he's a builder, a reformer, a master manipulator of the political system. And he's taken the seeds that Caesar sowed and really cultivated them into this whole new order.
And it's an order that will last for centuries, shaping the course of Western civilization. Caesar might have been the one who crossed the Rubicon, the one who broke the old system, but it was Augustus who built the new one.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Julius Caesar, it's clear that his impact went far beyond his own lifetime. He wasn't just a conqueror or a dictator. He was a catalyst for change, a disruptor whose actions had these unintended consequences that rippled through history.
Absolutely. And his story is a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles and famous names. It's about the choices that individuals make, the ambitions they pursue, and how those choices can sometimes lead to outcomes they never could have imagined.
Right. Caesar's ambition might have ultimately led to his downfall, but it also set in motion this chain of events that transformed the Roman world and laid the foundations for one of the most enduring empires in history. And it makes you think about that complex relationship between ambition, power, and legacy.
Absolutely. And it also makes you wonder if Caesar hadn't been assassinated, if he had lived to see his vision through, how would history have unfolded differently? Would the Roman Empire have taken a different path? It's a question we can only ponder, but it speaks to that enduring fascination you have with this period of history and with the personalities who shaped it.
Well, on that thought-provoking note, we'll have to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the world of Julius Caesar. We'll see you next time. Ready for explore another fascinating corner of history.